What's up guys, Mr. SLIN here with another video about Team Fortress 2, and today I want to talk to you about the time that I've spent playing this game and some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. And what I'm going to try and do with this video is take the 10,000 hours that I've spent playing and try and condense it down into like 3 big tips that I can give you that will hopefully save you a lot of time, hopefully save you from a lot of the pain from the mistakes that I've made, but also just give you some actionable items that you can take home and incorporate into your gameplay or whatever else it is that you're interested in life. But before I get into those tips, I kind of want to put things into perspective and give you an idea of what 10,000 hours looks like. Here's my Steam profile just to prove that I have the 10,000 hours, but something that I think is really difficult for people to conceptualize is what 10,000 hours really is. So imagine if you were doing this as your full-time job. You worked a full-time, just a standard 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year, which would be 2,000 hours a year. And if you started at the age of 25 and then you retired at 65, that's going to be 80,000 hours. So 80,000 hours is the full length of your working career. 10,000 hours is 1/8 of that time. That is 5 hours of just doing this as like a job. And the interesting thing for me is that I never did this as a job, right? I just did this as something in my free time as like a hobby while I was in school, while I was working. At 5 years, I haven't even been working for 5 years. I graduated school 4 years ago in 2013. When I first started playing, I never really intended on putting all this time into a video game. I'm going to be turning 26 in May, and I started playing March 18th, 2008. So I was 16 at the time. And I think that it was about 1.5 years into playing the game when I really started to look for something different. I was looking for a challenge, and I think the stars just kind of aligned, and it was the perfect timing because I was starting to get decent at Team Fortress and getting bored of stomping the same old pub servers over and over again. And I had just graduated high school and moved into my dorms at college, and I had escaped sort of the tyrannical rule of my parents. And I finally had this sort of independence, this freedom that I could do whatever I wanted. And I decided, man, I'm just going to binge playing video games, and I just played TF2 like all day long, like every day, and I think that's where a lot of the hours came from. And what really drove it through for me was this goal that I had, and I really wanted to become an invite player. That was the one thing that I really wanted. I knew that I wasn't going to become the best player in the world because there's usually someone out there in the world who's better at something than you are, but I knew that I wasn't going to be like driven enough to like fully get to be the best player in the world. I just wanted to be among the top players in my region in that category. And I'm happy to say that I finally achieved that goal a couple seasons ago when the team that I was playing on won Intermediate, which put us firmly in the top 10 teams in North America, putting me as like one of the top 10 medics, active medics that season. I was very happy about that. But what I learned is that you definitely don't need to put 10,000 hours into the game to get there. I think part of the reason why it took me so long was because I got distracted along the way. I spent a lot of time teamless. I spent a lot of time doing other things like writing guides and participating on the forums and getting into like camera work and casting and just doing a bunch of other random things that were not really directly related to the goal that I had. I think part of the reason why I spent so much time teamless is because I was an absolute trash can of a player when I first started playing. Not only because I was terrible with a mouse and keyboard, but also because I had this sort of toxic attitude that I thought I was doing everything right. And people would always tell me on my looking threads, like, you're actually a terrible player and you have a really bad attitude. And it took me a long time to figure out what that really meant and how to start working with other people. I think if I knew what I was doing and I was driven and disciplined towards reaching that goal, and if I knew what it took to get there, and if I had maybe some other FPS experience, I could probably reach that goal of being an invite player in like 2,000 or 3,000 hours. I think I've seen many other people do it before, and it's definitely achievable. You don't need to spend 10,000 hours in order to like master this game. But what I did learn with the 10,000 hours was that anything is possible given enough time. I think if a lot of people were to look back and say like, wow, here's the player I was 9 years ago and here's where I am now, like I really do think that anything is achievable now. And it's given me a lot of confidence to sort of reach my goal. Another interesting thing about the 10,000 hours is that I don't remember a lot of the time that I've spent playing the game. I wish I remembered everything, but at a certain point in time, it just becomes kind of a blur of things that have happened. And like, I can't even tell you how many times I've done the Badlands rollout. It's like thousands and thousands of times. And I just forget like so much of it. But I do remember a lot of the highs and the lows and the highlights. And something that's I can remember is just that I've always played TF2. It's this constant that's always been in my life that I just keep playing. And sure, sometimes I take breaks and do other things. Like I have 5,000 hours in World of Warcraft. I've played other games, but I find myself returning back to Team Fortress over and over again. And so that kind of leads me into my first of the 3 tips, which is consistency. I think it's really important if you do want to get really good at something, or if you want to achieve a goal, to be consistent and to be disciplined. Not just consistent in like, there's a couple of different ways you can look at consistency, but I think a lot of people when they're playing Team Fortress, they focus on that time they hit a really cool air shot, or, you know, when they hit like 10 headshots in a row, or that chain stab they got, or that time they beat Banny in a pug that one time. Remember that time? You know, it's really easy to focus on those highlights and those highs, but being a good competitive player is less about that one-off moment that maybe you got lucky with, and being able to consistently deliver the same result over and over again. You know that someone is really good at something and that they've truly mastered their craft when they can consistently deliver that result over and over again. It's a level of control that you cannot achieve. Like, you know, some of my favorite people that I enjoy watching on Twitch are these surfers, and it's really cool to hop into their channel and just be like, hey, can you do can you do this map? And they just nail it the first try, and you know that it just took them like a ridiculous amount of time to be able to do that. Or when you look at Banny, who's won like 12 lands or something like that, something ridiculous, like, you know that just being able to deliver that result over and over again just means that they've definitely achieved something that a lot of other people cannot achieve. And when you first start learning about being a competitive player and trying to drive that result home, like there's the basics. There's getting your setup properly, like just having the consistent setup, like my keyboard in the same place every time, my mouse in the same place every time, my monitor turned a certain way. Like there's certain things that just you need everything to be relatively the same. I think that's why a lot of teams when they went to LAN really struggled. One of the teams that come to mind was like a third place team in North America that had a reputation for being an online team because they would always be practicing the game at home, and they were really good when they were at home. But when they went to a live event at a LAN, that environment was so unfamiliar to them that they always choked. It's just being able to consistently just practice that same that same mechanic over and over again really will take you far. The second tip that I have has to do with what you practice. And I think something that you can practice no matter what skill level you're at are the fundamentals. I think the fundamentals are extremely important. One of the things that I've noticed that top players did before every single TF2 like major event was they would just hop into a DM server and just play for like 2 weeks straight, just to really nail down the fundamentals, to make sure that they knew the basics of the game. Imagine you're building this house and you have all these like really cool things on the house. You got like solar panels and you got a really cool TV, but the foundation of that you're building that house on is really weak. That house is going to fall apart and crumble. It doesn't matter all the fancy bells and whistles that you have. That house is going to fall apart. And it's really important that like you build these fundamentals. It's the foundation that you build this house on. And when I was playing myself, I I found myself really getting bogged down with these details that didn't really matter. I spent a ridiculous amount of time watching demos of top players playing this game, both as a player and as a caster. I would just analyze these games, and I would watch the little parts of the mid fights, and I would watch for like how this guy did a push and who entered the fight first and positioning, and I got really bogged down with those details. And I forgot what was most important. You know, my final season playing Medic, the thing that really carried me the furthest, the thing that got me, I think, the furthest out of all the things that I learned was just being able to count Uber. Somewhere along the way, when I was playing my matches, I had completely forgotten how important it was to consistently keep track of Uber. And I would forget sometimes, I would just like lose track of what the enemy's Uber was at, and suddenly like I was in the wrong position and they would just Uber on me and I would die. Like I didn't realize that if I just focus on the fundamentals, if I just keep track of Uber, suddenly everything else falls into place. Suddenly I'm making the right decisions and things are going my way. But if I forget about that, that's when things go wrong. The third tip that I have has to do with your attitude. And this, I feel, is the tip that a lot of people overlook because they think they have a good attitude. And I was one of those guys, back in my most toxic days, I was one of those guys who thought that he had a good attitude, that everyone else just had a bad attitude, that they were just terrible players. Your attitude makes a huge difference in your ability to perform. When you're playing in pugs, when you're playing scrims or matches, you're doing a lot of the same activities over and over again. The difference between playing a Badlands last push one day and a Badlands last push the next day, it just has to do with how you think about things. And if I had a really bad attitude, I would just bring everyone else down, and it just made the environment really bad to play in. But it also made it really hard for myself to focus. And I found that as I played more and more of this game, and I played more matches, and I got more experienced, I became a lot more comfortable with the situations that I was in, but I also got a lot stronger mentally, like my mental fortitude, my ability to focus and kind of sit down and say, okay, this is a match, get in the zone. That was really important to me. And that actually took me really far. I have this sort of ritual that I do before every big match that I play. And one of the parts of that ritual involves me just kind of getting up, going to the bathroom and washing my hands. And during that time, I take some deep breaths and I just like calm myself down and I kind of get into the zone. I get into the right mindset. I think it's important to do that, to sort of center yourself. And when you are centered, again, it just helps with everything else, with your consistency, the fundamentals, at playing your best game possible. So hope these 3 tips help you guys out. I do want to leave you with one kind of final moment. And my goal, like I said, was to become an invite player. And I feel like I achieved that goal. I actually won a couple like local lands. I won like a nominal amount of money. Like I won DreamHack, playing on a team with Carnage Johnson of all people. That was hilarious. But my favorite moments in Team Fortress didn't really have anything to do with winning. A lot of my favorite parts about the time that I spent in this game, when I think about those moments, they literally all have to do with streaming. And I think that's what keeps me around today. Like I'm not playing in leagues anymore. I mostly just I stream. I make a couple of YouTube videos, like all of my favorite moments in TF2 have been around streaming. And I think that's what keeps me around. I think that's what keeps me streaming today. And I just want to share that with you guys. I don't know what that really means, but hopefully you guys find your own moments that you enjoy in TF2, whether you're winning or not. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. Hope this was useful to you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.